Today we are going to be talking about the 8 most commonly used comma rules. We're going to start off in the order listed on the slide above you. We'll start off with rule number 1, the most simple of the comma rules. Essentially, comma rule number 1 tells you to use a comma before the conjunctions and, for, but, or, nor, so that join two independent clauses in a compound sentence. So let's look at two examples. The first example, I like working outside and I also enjoy reading. As you can see, I like working outside is an independent clause, as is I also enjoy reading. Because the two are combined with a conjunction, you put comma and then and. Same as in the next example. He got out of school, so he took a nap. He got out of school is an independent clause, and he took a nap is an independent clause because the two are being combined with the conjunction so. You put a comma and then the conjunction so. The second comma rule tells you to use commas after relatively lengthy introductory phrases or dependent subordinate clauses. Please note in the blue, it is important that commas should not be used when the clause or phrase comes at the end of the sentence, only when it is at the beginning of the sentence, and the third example we go through will illustrate that. Example number 1. In order to be successful, the introductory clause, one must learn to write well. In order to be successful, comma, one must learn to write well. Sentence number 2. After she learned the rules for using commas, rather lengthy introductory clause, comma, her grades improved. However, when the introductory clause occurs at the end, we do not need to include the comma. Her grades improved after she learned to use commas correctly. Third comma rule. The third comma rule tells you to use commas to separate items in a series. This is essentially the easiest comma rule. Be sure you insert commas before the conjunction that precedes the item unless your teacher or style manual tells you differently. Here's an example. Amy ordered 2 hamburgers, the first item in the series, comma, a Coke, comma, and a large order of fries. If you just have 2 items in a series and you're combining them by an and, you do not need to separate them by commas. Comma rule number 4. You're going to use commas before and after non-essential elements. Essentially, the non-essential elements are part of a sentence that provide you with additional understanding, not necessarily information that is prevalent to the sentence. Let's look at an example. The irrelevant information is highlighted in the red, which you can see outlined by quotations. So Horace Mann Elementary, which is the smallest school in the district, enrolls only 160 students. We know that the information in the red is non-essential because the sentence could easily read without that information. Horace Mann Elementary enrolls only 160 students, which is the smallest school in the district, adds additional information. Therefore, it is why it is set off by commas. Comma rule number 5. Comma rule number 5 tells you to use commas between coordinate adjectives of equal importance that modify the same noun. You do not separate adjectives of unequal importance. An easy way to determine whether your adjectives are of equal importance or not is to reverse them in the sentence. If the sentence does not reverse well, you do not use commas. We'll show you in 2 examples where you would use commas and where you wouldn't use commas. Example number 1. By the end of the game, the field was a slippery, comma, wet mess. We know these are adjectives of the same level because we can reread the sentence. By the end of the game, the field was a wet, slippery mess. However, in the next example, her big blue eyes and bright red hair made her less strikingly beautiful. The adjectives are unequal because if we would switch them, the sentence would not make sense. Her blue big eyes and red bright hair made her strikingly beautiful. Not adjectives on the same level, therefore we do not separate them with commas. Comma rule number 6. Comma rule number 6 states that you use commas to separate elements of dates and places. For example, the date was June 12th, comma, 1999. He was born in St. Cloud, comma, Mississippi. As you can see in the first example, we are separating the day from the year via the comma, and the second example, we are separating the city from the state. The third comma rule tells you to use commas before a direct quotation. For example, when he had studied for the test, rather lengthy introductory clause, comma, Paul replied, comma, direct quote, only a little, and as we are leaving the direct quote, and his grade showed it. So remember, when you're dealing with quotes, you need the comma before the quote is introduced, and if you have additional dialogue after the quote, a comma after the dialogue ends. And the last comma rule is comma rule number 8. And this comma rule tells you to use commas before and after words and phrases like however and nevertheless when they're serving as interrupters. If they are serving as a conjunction, then a separate rule applies. Let's look at an example and we'll talk about semicolons in another lesson. Example, Adam did not like math, period. He was, however, very successful in his math class. As you can see, however is functioning as an interrupter in this particular sentence. Therefore, we separate however with commas. So those are your 8 comma rules. Please memorize them, be familiar with them, as they will be graded for accuracy in many of your assignments from this point forward. Thanks.